Hello, I'm Kads and welcome to today's video. So today we're going to be taking a deep dive into Rotation 2 of the Cursed City. We're going to do an overall progression style update where I talk about how far I was able to get in Rotation 2 and some of the challenges along the way. Now we'll start by saying that I'm not going to necessarily break down exactly how every single team works, but I will mention the most important people on each of the teams, and we're not going to go over builds and stuff like that. But if you guys want to if you do want to see a deep dive on some of these teams in the future, then let me know in the comment section down below. So I do want to start off here by talking about normal mode, which we did manage to complete all the way, including Amius, so that is completed. I strive to always beat normal entirely because I think it's within my wheelhouse here in the end game. And then switching over to hard, I don't really expect to ever beat Soulcross fully without a lot more champions and a lot more gear, but my intent is to beat all of the lower threes areas, so Deadrise, Plagueholme, as well as Cobblemarket, and then I try to do as many of the awaken stages as I can, but those are kind of a crapshoot because if you just don't have the champions, or you don't have the awakening on the champions in the restrictions, then you can't do it. And there's not much you can do as a free-to-play player to correct for that, because I can't just build a new champion, right? It has to be within the boundaries. So starting with the Cobblemarket, obviously that is all complete, and the one thing to highlight here would be probably the first Bommel stage, where this wasn't too hard for me. I just paired a couple of supports in and some poison, HP burn damage, and more support here. So I know Bommel can be quite tricky, but in the Cobblemarket, he's a lot easier than dealing with him on other levels. And so as long as you have some debuffs and you can just stay alive, in this case, we're protecting ourselves with the shield, as well as some healing from Riho, healing from Reliquary Tender, you can kind of just sustain whoever and just do some damage to the boss. You don't necessarily have to worry about dealing with the exact mechanics of Bommel. You can kind of just DPS him down. But you know, having some support and having some way to heal back up once the minions blow up, because in this case you can see, well, I do have a freeze champion ninja, but he's negative affinity, so he doesn't really count. He didn't really land the freeze before like it was able to kill the boss, so not reliable. But if you can bring a freeze champion, that'd be great, but not mandatory. So just bring enough supports to heal through after the side minions blow up. Moving over to Plagueholme, and I will say that overall the stages were easier this time around. There's only a couple that I really had to go back and build new champions for. We'll talk about who I built for this rotation specifically as well. The stage I want to highlight here, again, hopping around through the bosses. First of all, it's Eternal Dragon and Tainted or hard mode Fire Knight here. And you can see we basically relied on Cryoden to be our freeze champion whenever we got to that, and then just bringing a ton of DPS in order to kill the bosses there. So again, not really employing the exact strategies there. I focused on the Eternal Dragon minions just so I could get my abilities back, because not everyone here is built with resistance. And then once that was down, I was able to just control the boss because he's relatively slow and we're relatively comparatively fast. So it's easy to keep the freezes on the boss and kind of DPS him down. Next one to mention is the Scarab King and the Spider, which is not hard, but it can be very, very slow. In this case, Lonatharl is of course the MVP. He has a shield where the duration matches the cooldown, so that's perfect for this fight. We have a healer, and then he also destroys enemy max HP on the A1, which is pretty useful. And then a general DPS Stalt is here just to kill the spiderlings, just to have the spider slowly dying while we deal with the Scarab King in the long term. Ideally, you would have some sort of poisoner here, but you can see, at least for my composition, I don't really have one. I could run Aox here. I will talk about him a bit later on with the other Scarab King, but that might be a possibility in the future. But in this case, I didn't end up running that, but that might be a way I go down the road. The other thing to mention in Plagueholme, which was one of the hardest stages I had to beat this rotation, and it took a lot of tries, a lot of hours of planning and trying to figure out exactly, like, not speed tuning, but figuring out who needed to go in what order and what abilities need to be used. But I digress. So the MVP here is absolutely Grunch Killjoy. Underrated champion probably, but yeah, he's pretty much the only champion in this entire restriction that had any form of a cleanse. Unfortunately, there's no block debuffs or anything afterward, but every time, or every 4 turns, you can full cleanse, and every debuff on you becomes a continuous heal. So very, very useful for dealing with all the Nether Spider poisons as well as the dragon's poisons. But obviously we're in this composition, we're running a buff strip composition, meaning that we can actually kill the minions, the little Nether Spiderlings. So we have Rand to buff strip, we have a debuffer and Mr. Dahi, and then honestly the other MVP here is actually Shatterbones, believe it or not. With the turn meter control and decreased speed, it helped separate the bosses because they usually go back to back, and obviously dragons are immune to decreased speed and turn meter drops, but it helped push the Nether Spider away from the dragon so that when he put poisons on us, we had time to react and deal and heal up before the Nether Spider would take a turn and automatically activate them all. And of course, Rearguard Sergeant in there, ally protection, as well as some continuous heals and potential for decreased attack, although that wasn't really mandatory. So MVP, definitely Grunge Killjoy, as well as a little bit on Shatterbones. For Deadrise, again, the stages weren't that difficult. It was pretty straightforward to get all the way through, aside from the 2 awaken stages. You can see here that I just don't have enough awakening on the champions. And this one, honestly, is very, very sad because I have like I think I have 9 out of 10 when you add all these, so I have 9, so close, but I don't have enough awakening, so I can't really do it. And then this one's even worse, where I have like 3 or 4, yeah, so just can't do it. Not a big deal. Maybe eventually I'll get the blessings or the awakening for them. But bosses to highlight here in Deadrise, of course, Scarab King. This is the composition I ran. It's negative affinity for 2 of the champions, but again, Lonatharl, MVP, Scarab King, God. And then I ran Venomage in this spot just because I wanted some way to place poisons on the boss. Obviously, she weak hit a bunch and it took a while, but it eventually got it done slowly but surely. And then Apothecary is just to keep us going quickly enough, but also being able to spot heal, just because there's no healing between these 2 here, akin to unlike Pythion and the other Scarab King. But I definitely think that this is again where I would try to run Aox the Rememberer in the future. I didn't end up building him out because I was prioritizing some other champions, which again we'll talk about later, but he's in the backlog of champions, so I would definitely run Aox here, and I would actually make use of his A2 here so that he can actually heal, and that way he should be able to duo it with Lonatharl. Obviously he can solo it if you build him in regen, but I don't like regearing my champions for this. I like building fresh ones and using fresh gear, so I don't have enough spare regen to build him separately for this particular fight, so I think I went with like a Mortal and some other stuff. But him and Lonatharl should be able to duo it because he should be able to heal both of them based on placing a bunch of poisons on the boss with his A1, as well as extending them with his passive. The other one to highlight that took a little bit of thought was stage 15 here, which was Bommel and hard mode Ice Golem. And you can see here we have double HP burn. Block debuffs is really what she's for, Glacea Soul Guide here, but also the freeze on the bombs. So that was kind of handy to make us take a little bit less damage from that. Daltus is again our primary DPS, just doing damage, killing the Ice Golem minion so we don't take big retribution hits. And then of course our healing sustain champion with a Wither the Crown. So HP burn with some healing, some freeze to reduce the minion damage, and then a primary DPS to deal with the minions, and I guess technically to kill Bommel as well. HP burn's not really going to do it over time. And lastly, we have the dreaded Soulcross, and you can see that we've done most of the stages, but anything you see highlighted is something that I can't do just because either I don't have the champions, I don't have the gear, and for me, my protocol on this is just GG. I just give up and I go do something else. I'm not going to worry about trying to max this out every time. I'm not in a rush to get the mythical champion here. I'll get him when I get him, and that's just going to be that. So if I can't beat a stage, like, you know, this one is ridiculously hard. I think, well, this one might be possible if I put more accuracy on Mashald, but it would take so many tries to try and get the true fears to proc on time. And also mine's unbooked, so I'd have to book him out in the future, which I did plan to do anyways. But some of the other ones to highlight here, this one is ridiculously hard because there's kind of no control, and you have like a what's his name? Hackhorn Smash Lord, and if he ever gets a turn, he full cleanses, block debuffs, massive heal, and it's just kind of GG from there. So couldn't really do much with him. And then Bambus, I think as well, was like putting himself to sleep and stealing all the debuffs that I put on other people, and I gave up on that one. You need like stun sets probably if you really want to get that one done. This one I feel like I just don't have enough champions to do it. I would probably need some 5th champion. It could be like Nazana in a stun set, it could be Blood Gorged to do some damage, TBD. But again, since I didn't really have a 5th slot, I didn't really worry too much about that one. S13 was just ridiculously hard. The restrictions are brutal here with the rare and epic spirit, and so I tried it a couple times, didn't get very far, gave up on that one. Same thing here. This one I got really close. I could always get, well, not always, but I could get to the last stage, but Lady Kimmy into Harima just and the freezes and the burns just wreck me. So again, I'm missing like a 5th champion here, someone else who can do some control or something, and you can see slim pickings as far as my options, and I'm just not seeing anyone who could really fill the slot. Maybe Altan, I don't know, but that one's just kind of a back burner for now. I think down the road I might be able to do S3 here. I do have Hefrak, but he's not fully built. I'm working on a lethal set for him, and when that's done, this might be possible. And then similar story here for S1, where I just pulled Jetney and Rorik, so summon them from the fragments, and so they're going to fill the 2 slots here, and hopefully between their decreased defense and a little bit of stunning and turn meter control, they should be able to do stuff. And then Soulbound Warriors and a stun set from Secret Rooms and Toontower Hard, and then of course Farrakhan and Fenix there for DPS. So those might be doable in a future iteration of the same rotation, but with like the few days left, I'm not going to bother trying to finish this out. So switching over to the bosses here in Soulcross, Iron Twins is of course the one to mention, and this one is basically Brimstone farming, more or less, with Teodor as my Brimstone champion. He does also have decreased speed on the A1, which is a nice bonus, but the poisons don't really do that much damage. Rhodos is obviously a primary DPS here as well, just doing raw damage, and then Tomb Lord is our primary decreased speed champion because he has a 100% chance on the A1. Lucky enough to have both of those champions, but I think Morrigan would work too. She has decreased speed on the A1, but then poisons, healing, and then again raw damage with some decreased speed and a little bit of Brimstone. Again, Teodor is primarily there for the Brimstone just to get the procs whenever it happens. So definitely advise adding Brimstone to your comp if you can get away with it. The next one is Sand Devil here, stage 9, which we kind of, again, farmed Brimstone a little bit with Gomlong Sky out on my account. Teodor is a backup, but this one's cleansable because it's 4-star. This one's not cleansable because it's 5-star. So primarily doing poison damage, and I stacked double poisons here because I wanted to put as many debuffs as possible on him before he does the cleanse, so we just take less damage. And then we're abusing Aniri's passive in order to preserve or to save Rector's Wrath as our primary reviver. So essentially, if everything went down, then Aniri's passive would protect Rector would revive Aniri would revive Gomlock, and then he could apply the irremovable Brimstone because obviously the Sand Devil will have killed everyone else. And then if I could get around to it, then I would revive the other two poisoners. Usually that was not the case, for at least for the middle of the fight, it wasn't really the case. It kind of depended on how the healing went in the meantime. But yeah, definitely Brimstone farming again, and then double reviver to kind of help the team run. Honorable mention of difficulty to stage 11 here, which was Tainted or hard mode Ice Golem and the Nether Spider. I found that the Nether Spider is probably one of the most difficult double bosses to deal with, because for the most part they really don't give you the champions that can really deal with her. Like, you don't have cleansers or you don't have something else. And so you can see here that we do have HP burn strategy, a little bit of freeze, so we're kind of depending on Crowden to actually land the freeze on the minions to control them. If he doesn't land it on both, I would just restart the run, more or less. I also use Tila for her A1 because she's able to steal debuffs, and so she could steal buffs, so she could steal the counterattack, and then when the other spiderlings would attack her, she'd counterattack and try to steal the other counterattacks, which is kind of neat. But the MVP here was most certainly Maruka, believe it or not. So whenever we had a bunch of poisons on us and the Nether Spider is about to go, we put Revive on Death on the whole team, and we all come back to life when we die. So instead of having a cleanse in this comp, you can see there's no cleansing. A little bit of healing from Tila if the minions are frozen. A little bit of healing from Oella from her passive as well as her direct heal. But primarily surviving a almost a wipe situation is Maruka for sure, MVP. Revive on Death to dodge all of the poison explosion from the Nether Spider. And the last one to mention for Soulcross is, of course, hard mode Fire Knight, which I was very, very impressed that I was able to get this done. And we're using a lot of fusion champions here. But the return of Skull Crusher, he was a former retiree, old school Demon Lord champion for me when I used to run the counterattack. But counterattack was the way that I got the shield down initially. And then from there on, we actually used 2 fusion champions. So Newt, of course, infamous hard mode Fire Knight God. Well, I guess Fire Knight God. And then Blizzard the Howler, one of the most recent fusions, a lot of freezing on the A1. He is unbooked, so he's not booked, and I just literally used him as an A1 bot to land freezes with the Newt. And then whenever the turn meter was low enough, then I'd throw in a Blessed Bash. And then if both of them were kind of missing freeze, or I guess if Blizzard was missing a couple freezes recently after a Blessed Bash, then I would just wait, Skull Crusher, put his counterattack back up, we survive the hit, counterattack, and break the shield down again and keep freezing. So that took a little bit of nuance, but I had to wait until I could level up and ascend Blizzard just to give him enough accuracy to land the freezes on the A1, again unbooked. Really quickly talking through the champions that I built for this particular rotation, we hinted at one right there, like I talked about with the Skull Crusher coming out of retirement. So he was the only champion in my list that was rebuilt, so a champion that was not being used before, that is being used, or it was not being used currently but is being used now just for that stage. But the rest of them to mention were freshly built. I built up Mountain King, who was a fairly recent pull a few months ago. I intended to use him for the Nether Spider Dragon stage in Plagueholme, but he ended up not working out, and I ended up using the comp that I just showed you. So I built him out, but he didn't actually get use, and he's kind of just sitting around waiting for a use in the future. We talked about Blizzard the Howler, of course. He's freshly built fusion champion. We talked about Grunch Killjoy. He was new. I had him, or not new, but I had him, but he's freshly built. I also built up Occult Brawler. You kind of saw him featuring on some of the teams that were at least being tested. basically just a poison bot, just using his A1 to place, or his passive to place poisons, his A1 to place poison, so a little bit of a DPS going there. And then honestly, one of the cooler parts was actually Golden Reaper. So she does have gear on, but it's really not intended to do anything. She's not booked or anything, and all I used her for was an Awaken stage in Plagueholme, because I happened to get a 5-star soul for, or happened to have a 5-star soul for her, and that was useful. She didn't do anything in the stage. She's just there to be able to start the stage. So I wanted to quickly highlight one of the things that I like to do, which is just holding on to epic souls here in the thing that are like 3-star if it's a champion that I might want to use in the future, and then 4-star and above is just by default. And so I didn't really have a reason to do that. I kind of just arbitrarily decided to do that in the past, and now that the Cursed City is out, it's kind of reinforced that strategy. So I definitely hold on to any epics that I get that are 4-star or higher, because typically what you need for stages, particularly in Soulcross, it's like you need an average of 4 per slot, or because there's 5 champions, 20 stars, and so having a 4-star in an epic is basically what you would need, or the average that you would need. So I want to hold on to the 4 stars for sure. Plus, so if any of these are featured in future Awakening stages, that would be oddly convenient. Unfortunately, if it's like a 6-star, I'd have to max them all the way out, unlike Golden Reaper, who's just a 5-star. So I'd prefer, honestly, to get the 5 stars or use the 5-star souls, but nonetheless, I do have some 6 stars lying around. So just keep that in mind if you have a bunch of epics that you're thinking about selling for coins or something like that. If you do care about progressing in the Cursed City in the future, in this rotation or other rotations, then consider saving them up, just because you never know, they might be the last bit of stars you need to actually start one of the stages. Oh, and I almost forgot to mention the big bad boss in the center. Of course, we did beat Amius on hard, and we have the free-to-play friendly team here that you can see, and we're featuring actually 4 fusion champions with Mighty Uko, Nishak Verminlord, Tatura Rhymehide, and Morrigan, and then the free to obtain champion Arbiter, of course, from the challenges. So 4 fusions and a free to obtain champion, and we're able to beat one of the hardest, most difficult bosses in the game. If that doesn't say free to play endgame, I don't know what does. So of course, Morrigan is the start of the show, with her passive just being able to keep your reduction on the entire time, which is very, very convenient. Tatura was in there to provide block debuff, so we didn't get stunned on the primary phase or primary form. Arbiter's in there because she can heal, but she's also very, very fast, so she gets a lot of turns, and she can also be our primary reviver. Uko is kind of backup revive, but he's mostly just an A1 bot for decreased attack, so we just take less damage. Nishak, of course, is our primary DPS, with the bombs doing a little bit, but mostly just stacking poisons on him until Kingdom Come. So that was the composition that I used to beat hard mode, and normal mode as well. I used the same team, yeah, that's how I beat Amius in this rotation. Kind of lucky that I have did all of these fusions, and the kind of a shout out to doing fusions if you can, because you never know when they might come in handy. And I do know that fusions can definitely be rough for some people to have enough resources to complete them on a regular basis, but this does showcase that even the most niche champions sometimes really come into their own on future content. You just never know what's going to come in the future. And so doing more fusions more than not is probably the best strategy I can recommend as a free-to-play player, because like I said, you never know when they're going to come in handy. I never thought I would use Morrigan in this particular way. I definitely use her in Arena. I think she's underrated for that purpose, but I never thought I would use her for a boss fight like this or anything like that, where she'd be like S tier for it. And Tatura Rhymehide definitely came out of the vault in order to fight this boss in particular, but also for the Sand Devil, which if you may have seen in my high level Sand Devil guide, he came out of, not retirement, but he came out of the vault. I kept trying to find a use for him for years. I mean, he's from like 2021 Christmas time, so it's been almost over 2 years since I've had him, and I did not have a purpose, but he came into his own here as well as for the Sand Devil. So anyways, that's going to do it for my progression update on the Cursed City Rotation 2. I'm most certainly looking forward to more rotations, because I do find this content really enjoyable. It gives me an opportunity to build up new champions that I've never used before, and then just fight under different circumstances that are just refreshing to me, at least for now. I guess when we get back to rotation 1 and start repeating things, it might get a little bit more monotonous, but for now it's still kind of new and fresh because they're just new rotations. So yeah, let me know in the comment section down below how far you were able to get in hard mode and or normal mode, depending on your progression level, and let me know which boss you struggled with the most. As always, if you did find this video helpful, then be sure to hit that like button down below, and if you enjoyed the content, then be sure to subscribe to the channel for more content just like this one in the future. Thanks for watching, and have a good one.